Hi, and welcome to Mind Shifters Radio, the second hour. And today is Wednesday, April 23rd, 2025. We're glad that you've joined us today. And I'll thank you for listening to the archived show, the pre-recorded show that we played yesterday. Hope you enjoyed it. That was from 2023. And I'll just give you a quick update before I hand the phone over to Michael. Did see the surgeon yesterday, and I am scheduled May the 5th to have a part of my colon removed. So appreciate you holding the space for that. They did find a mass, but thank God it was not cancer. So we're thankful for that, but it still has to come out. And I'm going to hand Michael the phone and take the baby. We're playing toss-off here.
I'm hoping that with this new phone, I'll be able to make comment or see comments and access callers. So if you're out there in listener land, delighted that you're here. And I'm just looking at the transcript because the mute button somehow went on. This is a phone I'm not used to, so my apology. Anyway, welcome. Glad you're here. So before we step into the tools of first century Aramaic forgiveness, I would love to hear from you. If you got a question, if you got a thought for us, something to process. We covered a lot of material over the last week when I could not access comments. We had, I don't know, 30 or so comments just right in a row yesterday. But unfortunately, I couldn't access them. And perhaps we'll be better off with this phone today, we're hoping. Jeanie, maybe you could send a note and just see if I can access that, and or push the call button and say hello. It'll give people a minute or two to catch up with us and get on the show. Welcome, Terry. Glad you're here. And if somebody would make a quick comment, I'll be able to tell with this, the fact that I'm on an iPhone now, one that I'm not used to. But with the problems we've had in the last week of not being able to answer callers or see comments, I'm hoping that perhaps we'll be able to see comments and answer callers from this phone. So we're early in the show, and I'd love to hear from somebody. Push the call button, say hello, tell me what's going on in your world. Tell me how the last week of power person dynamics has impacted you. I know it impacted me. It actually opened me up where yesterday morning I got a whole show download in the hour or so of meditation time, of quiet time after waking up. Good habit to acquire is rather than being out there and busy in the world, busy, got to accomplish, take time to, especially first thing in the morning or early mornings, just step inside, go inside, close the door, and listen to what's being said. And, well, I hope you're enjoying your hike, Terry. And I can see comments. How cool is that? Well, that's a step forward, so I may be able to answer callers. So if somebody wants to push that call button, if the last week has aroused some questions or thoughts for you, it would be awesome if you push the call button for two reasons. One, I would love to have a conversation with somebody about how last week's material, what we've covered in the last week or so have impacted you. And welcome to you too, Jeanie. I can see comments, so that's a step forward with this phone. It's this little tiny thing about the third the size of my regular cell phone, but gee, maybe we've got it. So Jeanie, if you push the call button, let's see if I can speak with you. See if a caller hits the button, and while we're waiting for some folks to show up, I know there's some others that were planning to join us, so we'll give them a minute or two. If you can push that call button and say hello, that would be awesome. And there we have Miss Jeanie. Hey, sweetheart. I can see you now. I was able to invite you in to speak, so are you with us? Well, excuse us for testing here, folks. I apologize, but let's try it again, Jeanie. You came up, but then you disappeared. So we'll try and catch Jeanie one more time. Okay, let's see if you are actually there. It shows me you're in queue. But unfortunately, I am still not hearing you. I can hear you talking through the wall, but you've disappeared, and it looks like I'm still not going to be able to have a conversation with anyone, unfortunately. And it actually looks like the recording has quit. So I don't know what's happening. What I'll do is ask everybody to just stay with us here for a minute. And if you don't mind, if you'll just hang there, I'm going to see if I can disconnect and reconnect and see if that improves anything. I'll be right back. Welcome to Mind Shifters Radio. My apology for our challenges. Thanks for coming back in, Terry and Jeanie, and maybe try once again, Jeanie. See if by calling I can actually pull you in, and then hear you. Let's just give that a try. And if not, then we'll just go on, and I'll just say apologies. So there we are. Okay, Miss Jeanie, it shows that you are in line. But still no luck, so we'll let that go, Jeanie. So I'm just going to say welcome and delighted that you're here. If you have a comment or a question, I can, at least I could a moment ago, go into the comments. So if there's anything on your mind that we can support you with, now would be a good chance to drop those questions in. Welcome, Melanie. If you, I think I'm going to be able to read comments today, although I can't put anybody live on the show. I don't know what's going on, but it has been a challenge and an opportunity to breathe and learn forgiveness. Hey, how amazing is that? You'd think that life was designed to teach us to forgive. And, you know, I have this sneaking suspicion that maybe that's the whole gist of the game at this point, at this stage. So glad you're here to be part of it. And I can see comments, at least I believe I can. So if you have a comment for us, a question on anything we've covered in the last week, it would be awesome to hear from you. I'm not able to answer calls still. I'm on a different phone. I'm on an iPhone today. First time I ever used an iPhone. However, it's still not allowing me to pull in listeners to talk to them, but I can see your comments. So if anything came up for you last week, welcome Michelle and Matt. Glad you're here. Cammie, delighted and honored. And you know, the purpose of life, as I started to say, is to teach us forgiveness, is to show us everything we're holding on to that's less than love. And of course, people oftentimes change around the title of my book. You know, it's of course, why is this happening to me again? But people will say things like, they'll call Heartland and looking for my book and say, I understand you have this book. Why are they doing this to me again? Or why am I doing this to myself again? And what we know is everything that's based in pain is self-inflicted. It never comes from the outside. And when that pain surfaces, it's an opportunity to learn to move through that pain, to learn to literally, when you realize that you are an energetic being, not a physical being, to remove everything from your structure that never belonged in a human structure. So the question becomes, do I live in my humanness? You know, if you've ever held a newborn child, take a moment. Imagine, remember the time you held a newborn and notice the essence of the newborn. It is absolute love. It is the presence of being. That's what, no, I don't care what you've been through. I don't care what the garbage has been. I don't care what the pain, the trauma, the fear, the hate, the rage, the guilt, the abuse. It doesn't matter what you've been through. This is one wonderful point that I've learned in working over the years with 50 years with people, is that the original state of being always remains shiny and new. When you finally uncover it, when you finally convince carbon-based memory that it's time to throw out the drama and the trauma and the pain, the original state of being is still brand new, untouched by that. It's like, if I have an AM radio and I'm listening to my favorite station, I go over to the FM tuner and I try to get that station. It doesn't matter how long I turn that tuner, I can't get that station. Well, it's the same thing when you realize the state of being as love cannot be touched by what happens in the world, cannot be touched by the rage, the guilt, the grief, the pain. So the question becomes, do I live in being or do I live in non-being? What state do I choose to live in? And our objective here, of course, is to support each and every person returning to the truth of who they are. So, but what happens is being becomes lost in sensation. And the pursuit is, oh, I need to go have an experience. I need this sensation. And all too often the addiction is to pain and trauma. And if nobody's giving it to us, people do it to themselves. You look at how kids these days are cutting themselves. And if the pain is not available from the outer world, then what do? They inflict it on themselves. So the objective of this work is transformation rather than sensation. And forgiveness is at the core of the process, because what was in the ancient teachings called the mind of man has become addicted to sensation. And people lost in the reality structures within their minds, their bodies, and their genes get stuck. But there is quite literally a whole other world available if I'm willing to do the work that it takes to make contact with it. You might remember the story of Paul. Now, this guy was a hired government killer. Basically, what he did is he killed people for a living. The disciple Paul, that was his job. He went around finding people that broke the quote-unquote rules of churchianity of the day, and he had them stoned to death. That's a pretty tough life. In fact, you'll remember there's one point where, though he seems to have all this knowledge, at one point he says, why is it the things I would not do are what I do, and the things that I would do, I cannot? He's stuck, he's lost, he's locked in carbon-based memory, although he's had the experience of stepping out of it. There's another point where he says, whether in or out of the body, I knew not, for I saw things which I could not utter. What does that mean? That means there is a whole world available that is far and beyond what our senses give us and what carbon-based memory plays out. So here's Paul. He lives in the normal reality structure of everybody, all the things are out there, the things I'm seeing don't have anything to do with me. They may attack me, they may harm me, or they may hurt me, and so I'm, fight against them. He plays that game, but then he comes to a point where he says, whoa, there's a whole different world here. I don't know whether I'm in my body or not, but I can't even speak to these things. I can't even think them. And when one first starts to do the inner work, it seems like what the spiritual teacher spoke of is an impossibility. It's not an impossibility. It's just blasted out. It's just covered over by the world of hostility and fear. That's what led Yeshua at one point to say, go into the closet and close the door. Get out of the world of sensation. Get out of your senses. you've got to be out of your mind. Because if you count on your mind to give you experiences, then you miss the whole world. We look at that Harvard research done back in the 50s where they had people hooked up to electrodes, and they showed that in a time frame where 10,000 brain cells are firing, literally they can measure approximately 10,000 units of electrical activity happening in the brain. And on a conscious level, the max amount of data that goes into conscious awareness is 9 bits. So we live in this 9-bit mind. We live in this tiny thing called perception, which, as long as we've never removed the generational patterns of hostility or fear, will tend to feed us the patterns of hostility and fear. And of course, if we live in denial, if we think somebody else is the cause of that, then in that denial, our mind creates false pictures that shows us that it is everybody else's fault. But of course, there comes a point where you say to yourself, I've been through this 87 different times with 42 different people. This rage that I just blamed you for, I remember, actually it was just 2 weeks before I met you I had that same rage. I wonder if it's got something to do with me. Because here I am blaming you for it, but I remember before I ever met you, before I knew you, that I had this rage. I can even remember 12 years ago, 20 or 30, 40 years ago, decades before. But the mind is tricky, because what the mind does, what the human mind does, is it literally converts thoughts into pictures. So if I've been brought up, as most of us were, by the age of 4, most every one of us was very indoctrinated into being very devout religious members of the one world universal religion of blame. And so if my thoughts are and my language are about blame, this is your fault, my mind has no choice but to show me a lie, to hide the truth from me. Gee, I've been through this 87 different times with 42 different people. I'm the only one that was there every time. This has got to have something to do with me. And the power of this genius piece of work that was given 2,000 years ago, that you can collapse that world. You can forgive. You can actually cause that world of it's all everybody else's fault to collapse, and you can drop. Now, this is not Dr. Feelgood, but you can drop directly into the pain, and by doing so consciously and breathing and holding to active present love, you begin the dissolution of that pain. So when Yeshua says, go into the closet and close the door, he's saying you can't be out there in the world doing all this stuff and be successful at cleaning up your mind. You can't do it in noise. People have created, you go into churches and people get high on the music. Oh, this feels so good. Well, you can go to a concert and get just as high if you like the music. But is that doing the work? No, that's just a sensation. It's a nice sensation, but it's just a sensation. The objective here is to get out of sensation and to live from being. What do you have to do that? What do you have to do to be able, like Paul, to say, God, I don't even know if I was in my body or not, because the stuff I was seeing was just like, whoa, I had no way to even start to explain it. There's another passage where you hear in the scriptures, and none of this has got to do with theology. This has got to do with how we get to really, truly live as human beings, how to really, truly live as the active presence of love that we're designed to live as. So that's the objective here, is to live in that presence. So here we hear the Creator saying, be still and know that I am God. You can't stand there and listen to all that raucous music and be still. You've actually got to be able to, and that's one of the reasons we call it still point breathing. Because when you utilize the breath correctly and you allow that still point to happen, that's when you can make direct contact. That's when, if you allow yourself to build the awareness, You will see things that you cannot talk about. Now, those who are addicted to sensation, when they're told to do this, it's like as that group of apostles did when they asked Yeshua, what do we need to do? And he told them, they said, too hard a saying. Who can hear it? Basically what they were saying is, I need the fix for my addiction. I need my busyness. I need my appetites fulfilled. I need to get more money. I need to acquire more stuff. I need to assert control. I can't just sit here and quietly breathe and deal with what's inside of me. I don't want to look at this internal suffering pain. I don't want to deal with my story directly. I want to be able to tell the story about you and how you did it to me. And that literally becomes addiction. But the disciples, when they said, too hard a saying, who can hear it? They're basically saying, this is too much for me to overcome. However, if you start utilizing the breath properly, and you start peeling off the energetic dynamic of the noise, there will come those quiet places. And I'll say from my work, in the last 50 years of developing this, the key work, the most important work, the deepest pieces of work that I've done have been in just the last 2, 3, 4 years. And one of the things I've learned recently to do when I've gone into the closet and closed the door, when I've got into that still point, is that when I listen to the pulses, when I pay attention to the pulses moving within my structure, that's when Rukha is there, ready to communicate, ready to do a work in me. I've come to realize that, and I've watched it as I allow myself to get into that space of real stillness, real quiet. Then I've watched the pulses move through different parts of my structure, and I've come to understand that that's a space where messages come directly from Rukha. Remember, Rukha in Aramaic, Rukha de Kudsha, is the breath. It is Aramaic. Rukha speaks of the elemental forces. To Kudsha is the root of the word kosher, means that which is proper. There are literal elemental forces in us for that which is proper. And what I'm discovering more and more every day is that they show up as pulses within my structure. And when I stop and really pay attention to those pulses, instead of, distracting myself with sensation, with addiction, when I allow myself to really touch in, I can tell that that power is moving. There is always a message with it. And it's like that's the point where Rukha is ready to fulfill the second half of the definition of that word. If you go back to the Aramaic language, when the story of creation happens, it doesn't say that God sent out his spirit. It says the Creator sent out its breath. Literally, this is your direct link. In Aramaic, it's Rukha de Kudsha. And, like in English, we don't have gendered words. But for instance, if you know how to speak French, you know that there's an LE that goes before a word or an LA. The LA, if I'm remembering my high school French correctly, is the masculine. The LE is the feminine, or it might be reversed. Whichever it is, doesn't really matter. But the words are gendered feminine. In Aramaic, Rukha de Kudsha is gendered feminine. So it is literally a feminine elemental force. And there are two things that this power does in us, if we're ready to listen. And it's something that's just been becoming clearer and clearer for me in just the last year or two, that these pulses are that power, ready to speak. and they'll speak directly to whatever it is that you're dealing with. You'll get direct and specific instructions for your own process. That's where your real teacher is. The only purpose for me or any other teacher is to help to guide you to that. People who need some sort of an outer teacher will, they'll create their gods out of men or whatever they tend to follow, money. But your real teacher is Rukha to Kucha. And what is her definition? What's the definition of that word in Aramaic? It is she, gendered feminine, who, one, undoes the effects of your errors. Literally goes in and begins undoing the dis-ease processes in your structure. And two, will teach you the truth. If you really pay attention, that's when you'll be spoken to directly by that true teacher. Now, most are so busy. Most are so drugged, they're in their upset, they're in their self-condemnation or the condemnation of others, or their loss, or their poverty, or their hatred, or their fear, or their grief, or their pleasures, their alcohol, their drugs, their food, their sensations. They're so outer directed, they don't allow themselves the space to feel that presence within them. The primary place where you get to experience the presence of love is inside of you. It is the truth of who you are. That presence is the actual essence or substance of life moving in you.
You have comments, or you're not seeing them?
Okay, Jeanie's just informing me that I have comments, but they're not showing. Let me just look and see if I can see them. Oh, there are a bunch of them there, but they were not showing up. I'm not sure why. My apology. It didn't tell me I had comments. I thought, well, everybody's being so quiet. So give me just a second to get those comments open, and let's see what we need to address. My apology. So now I know I need to check them, even if they're not showing up as comments. So let's see. Volume sounds like it's decreased. Okay, 5 minutes ago. Nothing's changed on my end. Terry, I'm not sure. And Cammie, I was thinking yesterday that feelings are just sensations. You're right, that's it, just sensations. And I don't need to put so much weight on sensations. My offering would be that feelings, or what we call emotions, are really information. I think it's something to pay attention to. But when you recognize that it is something that is based in some form of hostility or fear, that's the time to apply forgiveness and weaken those energetic patterns. So it's not something you want to ignore. If there's an energy moving in your structure that doesn't belong there, you want to pay attention. And if it doesn't fit, that's where you take the clue. If you hear words flying up, coming to the surface, my words fly up, my thoughts remain below, said Shakespeare. He was telling us that if we'll pay attention to our words, it will inform us of what's going on in our unconscious. And if our words are out of alignment with the truth of who we are as love, then that will tend to create sensations of pain within the structure. But yes, getting lost in the sensations is, I think, an error. I think you're right on there, Cammie. And as you apply forgiveness, you touch into the thought disorders that create the sensations, change them, and boom, bingo, the sensations disappear. And that is exactly the kind of thing that I'm talking about, Cammie. You're right on. Yes. And looking down, volume isn't loud today. Yeah, I don't know what's going on, Dawn. I'm using a different phone to see if I could see comments and such that we were having trouble with yesterday, so I apologize. I'm not sure what it is that's happening. And let's see, Terry, today Dr. Tim was talking about being willing to go deep into the sensation and feelings. That can be very important. The key is just not being run by them. So I think maybe a distinction between the feeling sensations required for pure forgiveness work and the cheap substitutes we use to escape from sensation, addiction, distraction. Exactly. And so you want to touch into whatever is moving. And yes, if you haven't found the thought disorder, remember the opening words in the book of John, where the Greeks tell us, it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word became flesh. In Aramaic, it doesn't say that. It says, more literally, in the beginning was the mind energy, and the mind energy became flesh. Now, my offering is, and you can look up YouTube. Bruce Lipton has done some things. He's a cell biologist, and he shows that when you think a thought in the cell biology laboratory, you can see that thought becoming an actual molecule, like something that was non-physical. It's not in the structure, and all of a sudden, a neuropeptide shows up. A thought, literally a pattern of energy, comes into the structure, and then that neuropeptide circulates around in the structure until it finds a cell with a receptor site that matches. It lands on the receptor site and inserts itself in the cell, shows up as, and if we were inside the cell watching this neuropeptide land on the receptor site above us, what we'd see coming into the structure would be what we call chemistry. If it's of a disintegrative nature, if it's an inharmonious or quote unquote sin, an energy that's off the mark, something incoherent, then I want to pay attention to it and remove it. And what's going to happen when an incoherent energy hits the cell is the cell's going to say, ouch. My take is the energy system is set up so that if I'm putting a creative energy, i.e. a thought, into my structure, it's going to land on a cell, and its landing on the cell is going to tell me the quality of that thought. And if it's based in some form of hostility or fear, an energy that doesn't belong, then the sensation is going to be that of ouch. And you want to go as deeply into that as you need to in order to decode and remove the mind energy, the thought behind it. It's a mind energy that's important. The sensation's just, it's kind of like the fire alarm goes off. If I go over and cut the wires to the fire alarm bell, I haven't done anything to take care of the fire. If I lose myself in the sensation, I've done nothing to change the mind energy behind it that created the sensation. So yes, I want to go deep as I need to and develop the skill of decoding the mind energy, the thought behind it, or at least breathing through it so that I shift. I mean, literally, what I see is what Yeshua is asking people to do ultimately is to develop the skill of being able to go inside of every cell in their structure, retrieve the energetic patterns they put there, and throw the ones out that don't belong. And that's the whole thing of forgiveness, is removing those energetic patterns. I'm talking about something a little different here when I'm talking about getting lost in sensation of, when we're outer directed, looking out there in the world, that the world is the place where I'm going to get my experience. And my offering is that the world isn't the place to come and get an experience. Anything that you experience in the world is from the past. And you might see why Yeshua said to this young man who said, well, I have to go, I'm going to follow you. I really like what you're doing, but I have to go bury my father and my mother first. What this man was saying, in that culture, the oldest son had to take care of his parents until they died and buried him. So he might have been gone for 20 years. Yeshua said, let the dead bury the dead. Let those who are lost in the world, who are lost in sensation, go. Now, churchianity misinterpreted that and said, world bad. No, world not bad. World, Garden of Eden. It was given to us as a gift. But if we go into the garden and look for an experience there, something from the past, then we're the dead buried by the dead. If we go into the garden consciously, originating mind energy and being a conscious creator, then the Garden of Eden opens up and flowers for us. It's exactly what we're there for. So removing the hostility and fear, going into those sensations and cleaning them up, touching into the energy behind them, and then being aware that the the world of sensation is not um, where the answer is. And Cami, I apologize. I don't know what's going on with this phone. It's we shifted over to an iPhone in order to see if we could get this more. At least I can see the comments here. And so you had said just notice and say yes. When we did your quantum still point, yeah, that's exactly it. So when and so Cami, let me read Cami's whole comment. You had said just to notice the sensations while doing the quantum still point session. That was what brought me there. Yes, when I and part of the training, the quantum still point is a 3 to 5 day process, and part of the training is to notice, to learn how to feel where resistance is in your body, remembering that in Aramaic the word Satan has nothing to do with the dude out there with a red suit of tail and a pitchfork. It's an internal word that describes an internal condition. And the word more literally translated would be the resistor, one who misleads. So part of the quantum still point training is noticing where the resistance is and then being able to focus there, soften, and let it open. To free yourself of the tensions, because the tensions are the places where we lock down the proper flow of energy. So if there's a muscle that's all tense, and as I spoke earlier, when the pulses come through, you're not going to feel those pulses. You're not going to feel the instructions you're given. You're not going to be conscious because the system's so locked up. So the earliest part of the quantum still point training, the personal intensive, is to find the resistance in your structure, to learn to take your breath to it and let it soften, let it open, let yourself access what's there and move through it. That's the initial phase. So that literally, I mean, my offering is most of the people today live literally in the Aramaic sense, trapped in Satan their whole lives. Again, Satan being the resistor, one who misleads, nothing to do with the Greek, dude with the suit, the red suit, the tail, and the pitchfork. It's about what's going on inside of us. And so letting everything soften and open is a starting point for getting to where your structure can come back into proper alignment. Ultimately, the objective of the quantum still point is to bring literally, every energy system has an antenna. And if the antenna, which I'd offer is the bony structure of your so-called body, if the antenna is physically or emotionally traumatized, then it is misshapen. The shape of an antenna determines the frequencies it receives. If you've got a TV antenna up there on the roof and it's a proper antenna for where you're located and you're watching channel 4 and that antenna is oriented properly, you got a great picture and great sound for channel 4. But if somebody climbed the tower and bent the arms of the antenna and turned it backward, all of a sudden your picture would get fuzzy, snowy, and you'd have difficulty hearing it because the shape of the antenna has been changed. You watch people who, for instance, grind their jaws, and what are they doing? They're clamping down and restricting the movement of the antenna. Most people think when the baby's soft spot hardens that the head is fixed, but that's not true. Your head, your whole bony structure, is in a continuous movement, or at least is supposed to be. So it is a self-adjusting antenna, and especially the fine bones of the head, the skull, the face, those bones are in this continuous extension flexion mode, which means they're going through a range of motion, which, my background's in the world of electronics and with a study in physics. So I go back to those brain cells and it's like, oh, this is a self-adjusting antenna that's moving through a range of shapes, a range of frequencies to bring in the energies that it needs. If the antenna is restricted, what happened? You don't get the energy you're supposed to have. So, and how do you restrict the antenna? Well, one of the first things you do is you tighten up. You lock things up. You lock up muscles. You lock up breath. So the objective, well, the starting point, you'll remember if you've done an intensive, we do the energy field work as part of restoring the integrity of the antenna, getting it back into its full, proper range of motion. It goes to a deeper level in the quantum still point where we're looking at noticing where the resistance is, softening into it. There's a significant amount of practice in that 3 to 5 day quantum still point intensive for learning to touch into that and then learning to soften it so that the proper range of motion, the restriction is removed and you can go back to a proper range of motion. So that all ties together. Thank you for those questions. And if anybody's ever has any other thoughts, I will keep an eye on the comments, even though it's not showing me there are any when I just have it open. So thank you, Jeanie, for letting me know about that. Appreciate you, dear heart. So once again, the objective ultimately is to get directly in touch with that teacher inside of you that will give you the instructions for whatever you need. And unless you're too busy or drugged, then you'll notice those subtle energetic movements. You'll notice those subtle energetic shifts. And when you let go of the game of being outer directed, then you'll allow yourself the space to feel, one, the movement literally of your own antenna, the bony structure. You'll actually come to the point where you'll feel it moving. You'll feel pulses moving within it, and you'll feel the correction that's happening when those pulses occur. And you will literally, you'll have direct communication where you'll say, well, no, I didn't hear a voice, but I knew exactly what I was being instructed in. That's Rukha, she who undoes the effects of yours and teaches you the truth. If you're not so busy in the outer world of sensation, that power has always been there. It's never gone anywhere. It's never gone away in anybody. But if you don't go into the closet and close the door, it doesn't seem like it's available. It doesn't seem like it's there. So starting to tap into that, in the ancient teachings, they called that an initiation. Okay, there's a question. Let's see. Are there any upcoming still point retreats? Yes, as a matter of fact. Sensations. Yeah, actually, the 23rd of May, so in about a month, we'll be starting a 9-day residential Why Is This Happening to Me Again intensive here in just outside of Bristol, Virginia. And so if anybody's interested in doing that, you could drop Jeanie a note, JEANIE at WHYagain.org, and let her know you're interested. Give your name and phone number, and I'll call you, and we'll have a conversation about whether it's appropriate. But we're doing a 9-day Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And in that 9-day, we'll be doing a really powerful dietary process called the Nutritarian diet. It's one that really works on learning how to get to dense, good-tasting food. Yorate, some of you know, she's been working in the food field for years, and so she's going to come and be the chef for that. Everybody will get a chance to put their hands on the food and learn some of that preparation. And so that's a possibility for anybody that wants to participate there. We'll be doing the workshops, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? Healing Through Relationships, Communication, Did You Hear What I Think I Said? Hands-on energy field work, mind shifters, and still point breathing. So all of that happens within that 9-day time period. There'll be the hands-on energy field work training. as well as the food training. And you'll get to do the still point process. And I will be, there have been a couple of people who've asked, I haven't set dates yet, but I'll either before the 23rd or after the 31st, depending on requests. I will probably be setting up to do some quantum still point work, personal intensive work. So if somebody wants to come in a few days early or stay a few days late to do that 3 or 5 day process. And it's interesting, you mentioned that you've got little kids. The fact that there's a plural in that. We have had people who have brought their children. In fact, I remember one woman who, it was about a week before the intensive, and she had the guidance she needed to come, and she had 2 kids. She had a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, and she brought this 3 and 5-year-old to the intensive with her on a week's notice. It was just like, I knew I had to do this. Actually, it's someone that I'm still in touch with, and that goes back, 35 years ago. Her kids are in their 40s now. Anyway, it's interesting, but that's what will be happening here. And or, as you say, it's hard to get away. I certainly understand that with little kids. The fact that we have a newborn in our house, or at least now he's 7 months, and our granddaughter at 6 years, we know how busy that can get. But perhaps if you wanted to set up and do a 3-day, maybe it's something you could do over a weekend or what have you, a 3-day quantum still point personal intensive, that's another possibility. So going back to the idea of achieving this state, and it's been called in the past an initiation. Let's see, I know I'm supposed to do the work. I'm currently working with, awesome, through Jen Mindful. Oh, that's awesome. Fabulous. I'll look forward to seeing what opens up there. Tell Susan we said hello. I've actually called her a couple times the last few months and haven't gotten back with her. Of course, I know her life is busy and our world's been pretty busy too. So please tell her I said hello. I'd love to hear from her. So this initiation state cannot be experienced, even if it happens to you, if you're all caught up in what's going on out there in the external world. It's interesting, in India, they have a tradition. And it's usually, unfortunately, it's still this sexist kind of thing, like they're trying to get bring back into America. But the men would be householders in the early part of their lives. They'd raise their families. And then in their later life, they'd go off to the ashram and do their spiritual work. Now, I think we're in a state where it's time for us to do that differently. But delight to connect with you, Devin. I'll look forward to hearing from you. So when we're stuck in the world, something happens. An initiation occurs, and you get that direct experience. It might just be for 10 seconds. I can remember the first time it happened to me, and it goes back about 45 years ago. I was doing a workshop in Delray Beach, Florida. I was actually teaching on healing, and I was showing the difference between healing the already existent cell, and the reason why diseases recur is because you can heal the already existing cell. You can treat the already existing cell. But if you don't treat what's behind it, what's in the genes, then the next generation of cells is going to carry the same disease process. And there was a time period of probably about 12 hours where as I was teaching this, like this whole understanding opened up. I finished the workshop, I went home, I sat down to write, and I thought I'd written pages. And I had a bolt of light go up my spine and explode in my brain. And all of a sudden, I was able to ask any question I wanted, and I was given this full-blown visual picture of the answer. And a total, although there was no voice involved, there was no speaking, I was given a total auditory answer. I could hear the answer to my question. I got about 12 hours that first time around, my first initiation. And now I'm learning that it's those pulses in the body that are opening that energy that takes it to the next level. It's a process. But if we're stuck in the world of sensation, then, that song the kids had a few years ago, I can't get no satisfaction, it never happens. There's no true fulfillment that can be had there. Because one is not in the garden where they're designed to be, they're in their brains. That number one pseudo solution we talked about of the non-being mind, if I could just figure this out. And the truth is, you can't figure it out. When you look at all the complex energetic dynamics that happen, let's just say in any simple interaction between two people. I have one reality in an interaction, you have another, and what unfolds? To look at the history of what's in my brain cells, what my genetic history is, what my power person dynamic is, look at what's going on in your brain cells, your history, your genetics, your power person dynamic. There's no figuring that out. But the beauty is, if you have the tool of forgiveness, and there is errant sensation, and I call errant sensation anything based in hostility or fear, then you apply forgiveness and you collapse that. You drop right into, by engaging in forgiveness, you get to drop, which most people don't want to face, you drop right into the underlying energy. You work to stay conscious rather than get lost in it. And when you can bring and hold the breath, and that breath carries active present love on it, then what you've dropped into in the way of trauma begins its dissolution. That's how and where you're freed of it. And that technology of forgiveness, that technology of canceling the goal that drives the perception-based pain, and being able to drop into it and experience directly the undoing of that. And the undoing is not something that you or I can do. We meet a set of conditions, and forgiveness is basically it, and the undoing happens. It's not something you say, oh, I notice I've got this tight place in my, my right arm, and I'll just go in and undo it. No, you meet the conditions, and it is undone. We, of our own volition, cannot do that. But there is a power. And I remember Yeshua said, of myself, I do nothing. But there's a power in me. I've been initiated into relationship and direct connection with that power, and I function from that. That's where you want to get. And that's the whole objective of this work. Because ultimately, the real power that you want to get in touch with, the real teacher, is right there inside of you. And we're here to support you going there. And we're going to hold the space for you to have the best year yet of your eternal life.